so happy to have you on the podcast, Raul. I feel like I just love like everything that you're about with like nature and like yoga and also just like creating food that's really like healing for the body. I feel like that's something that like now I live in America and it's just like it breaks my heart how much processed things are, but then it's also like we take it for granted too of like, oh yeah, like we just go to the store and we buy everything, but then when you go back to like the practice of making everything from scratch, like I feel like one, not only is it way better that I'm kind of like, damn, like all of these store brands low key suck, but two, it's just like I don't know, there's like a that whole experience that when you then have the meal, it like adds a whole nother level of just like gratitude that you have for the food that you make versus like if you just purchase something, you don't really know all the people that were like involved in that process of like making things for you to consume. But I'm curious, like where did this whole journey of just like really becoming sort of conscious in the way that you're living and really having purpose in like the things that you do, was that something that you always were like, I'm about this life from out the womb, or it's something that you slowly discovered? Because I know Indian culture has a lot of that in just like our heritage, but yeah, I'm curious, like how did you sort of, yeah, like get on this path of conscious living?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking. I would say that no, I didn't have all this awareness that I do straight out the womb. It's definitely something that I've kind of like. So, growing up, I feel like I experienced a very contrasting, you know, life because for me it was exactly as you said, like everything was super processed. Even though yes, with Indian in our heritage, like there's definitely a lot more awareness of a lot of things, related to food and lifestyle, but still, like growing up here in St. Martin, I was exposed to a lot of the things that we're all exposed to in America, for example, processed foods. That was a big thing, I was into all the junk foods. um, Lifestyle choices. I mean, everything, was just so different back then than it is now for me. So I would say that it was a very slow unfolding for me where I became aware of one thing and then the other, and then from there on, I was full blown into like everything has to be organic or everything has to be homemade and natural and non toxic, um, and I have to know where the source is, what the source is and where everything is coming from. So yeah, it's definitely been a natural unfolding, and I would say the biggest like chunk of my life where that awakening and like learning about different truths about where everything comes from. And I know it's sounding very vague, but we'll get into the details. But um, I would say it would be when I was in my early 20s, or even a little bit before that. Yeah, so late teens. I would say that's when I started becoming very aware. I was in high school. I started following all these channels, on health and food, and there was so much information that was being kind of exposed, that yeah, I guess since then up until now, it's just been, yeah, a beautiful like unfolding.
I think that's such a beautiful way to describe it because it really is a process of unfolding, of peeling all of these layers of like veils or even like delusions that we just develop just through like being in our society of like, oh, like okay, this is what humans do, cool cool, or like this is how I shouldn't behave, cool cool, or I gotta be guarded here, cool cool, and then you realize like, wait, wait, who am I again? Wait, we don't actually, I don't know about that. Oh, actually, boo, you're, maybe we don't feel this way after all. And it's just like when you get to that state of just like being curious enough to see like, oh Lord, like what have I done? We have gone completely off the track that we were meant to. and then you slowly peel back all of those layers. And I do think, yeah, it is sort of like a it's an organic process of like you discover one thing, then it leads you to the other and to the other, and then before you know it, you're like full blown down this path of like, holy crap, like what was I even doing before? Like who was that person? But even just having love for that journey of unfolding, because I think like a lot of time people think like we should have all the answers, but I think, this world is about discovering like who you are and learning and like really going through that process of becoming more present, more aware, and just opening yourself up to the truth of things that you don't really see, I think, as much as when you're a kid. But I definitely believe that having that sort of that heritage within Indian culture that is deeply in tune with like how are we supposed to live really and truly, about like the sort of ethics and morals around being a kind person, having compassion, really being in the present, leveraging the power of breath, like all of these things. I felt like for me as a kid, I loved Indian culture, but I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit ashamed too on the island because it's like very different, because it's like it's a Christian based community, and anything that's not, a very conventional view of God is often looked at as like just bad, and like obviously kids say very mean things too, so that doesn't help. But I'm curious, like, yeah, how has it been for you, sort of like going in back to like I guess like our roots of like what our culture has to say about being consciously in tune with our environment and the way that we act to each other, and how that sort of, yeah,
Mhm.
impacted your unfolding.
Yeah. Um, Another good question that I really would have to think a little bit more on, but I think the first thing that comes to my head is just my parents, they turned to spirituality, and we can go on about what spirituality is. It's such a vague word, I feel. Um, but because it means different things to different people, and there's just so much that can be said on it. But I would say that the version of spirituality that I understood at the time, my parents had turned to that um, when I was very young. So I had always been exposed to a lot of quote unquote spirituality. Um, for example, we used to have um, these sort of gurus, for lack of a better word, who would come to the island, and um, there would be these gatherings, and
Like Baba G and stuff. I feel you. I feel you.
yeah, exactly, yes, but many more of those. So I had always been exposed to a lot of these teachings, and I would say that that definitely had an influence on where I am today. And even though I don't quite resonate with everything that I was exposed to back then now, I see how it was kind of an important, part of my journey, and how that kind of led me to where I am today. Again, from one thing to the other, and then here I am today with a very different perspective, but a more expanded perspective. So yeah, I would say that in that way, I feel like that has to do with that can be accredited to, you know, to our heritage and yeah, roots.
I feel it. Those Baba G gatherings were always like, you're kind of were like, do I have to go? And then you
I
go and you're
know.
low key like, this man low key spitting some wisdom right now. Like, Demi Lovato, broski? Really? I'm like, that's so interesting. I'm like, I guess he's not out of touch
Yeah.
after all. Yeah, no, those are fun. Like going to satsang and things like that. I definitely think, yeah, there's sort of that like initial curiosity, or like it plants the seed, because like I
It plants the
remember,
seed. That's what it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
very distinctly seeing my aunt even meditate as a kid and kind of just being like, okay, like that's cool. I don't know why you're doing that, but cool, cool. I like now as I meditate, I'm like, damn, she was ahead of my time. Like I was just being such an ignorant little child, and here, were these seeds being planted in front of me, and I was just completely oblivious. But it's like I'm so grateful to even have had those experiences, because like, yeah, you have that sort of foundation to be like, wait, I remember that. Oh yeah, that was discussed. You're right. And then it kind of like gives you a place to be like, okay, well, this is familiar. So now I can really go deeper. And I guess, like, how did you go about sort of like your unraveling process? Because you said it was very sort of like from thing to thing, but was it like, I guess, like, were there specific modalities that helped you as you were navigating that unraveling?
So I remember at the time I was going through something. Um, I was in an online relationship, and I would say up to present date. I mean, that's literally the only relationship I've been in, but that's another subject for another time. But I remember really going through it, in that relationship. It was, you know, for lack of a better word, toxic, and I remember going through this sort of depression, and the first thing that I remembered from, a lot of the teachings that we were exposed to was this concept of non attachment, learning how to detach from certain things in life. And so, because I found myself so attached to this individual and knowing well and good that it wasn't serving me and it wasn't good for me, I remember really diving deeper into the concept of non attachment, detachment. And yeah, I would say that's where it kind of began for me. And I really looked into it a lot. It's a whole practice, detachment. And then from there, I remember I started following all these, self help gurus and spiritual teachers, as they would call themselves at the time. And there were, several whom I resonated with. And it would be, like I said, from one teacher to another. And then I would kind of just get what I needed to get from the different teachers and their teachings. And yeah, that's kind of how it unfolded for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Non-attachment is funny because I literally read the Four Noble Truths yesterday, like the sutras. Um, and I felt like they were calling me out. I was like, damn, they wrote this for me. I'm like, everything they're saying, I was like really going through it in my head yesterday, and I was just like, oh, shots fired, throw the shade my way, why don't you? And like, really, I was like, just going through a lot in my own head, and I was causing myself like so much anguish. And it was interesting because I came onto the part where they were talking about non-attachment, and it was like they were like, so how do you like detach? Like you just let go, and it's just like you think like, okay, like I don't want to be attached to this, so just stop, but you just can't. Like it's just like not, it's not something you can think you do. It's like an actual action of like letting go of something. And the analogy that they use, which I thought was like so beautiful, they were like, imagine like you're holding on to a clock and you're like, I want to let go of this. Well, you don't just throw it and like break the clock and be like, I'm not attached to you anymore. Ugh. But really, you just like set it down
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
let the clock do its thing, and you just like let
Which
it
is
be
easier said
there.
than done, right?
Exactly. That is a fact. So much easier said than done. And it's like when we're in these states of like where we're causing ourselves suffering, it's like instead of us getting so like graspy on the suffering or the stories that come out of that suffering and the narratives that like just start to just whirl all the memories, all the anger, like you, instead of like being like, that is me, this suffering is mine, like I have all of this, you just watch it. Like you literally just observe the suffering and just say, well, that is suffering, and just let it do its thing. And it's like interesting because it was talking about like with these objects of the non-self, like where we get these thoughts and these sensations, they have a birth and they die. but like when we're so sort of like attached to it, we never really let it die. Like we hold on to the grief or the anger, and every time like something triggers that seed, you just relive all of that pain. Whereas like when you're operating from non-attachment, you really just like you let it be born, you watch it, and you let it die. And in the process of letting it die, you get the actual release of like that letting go. And I was like, damn. And I tried it and I was like, wow, look at this. Look
Yeah.
at this. The relief. Oof.
Yeah, and healing
Fantastic.
is such it's such an organic process, you know. I mean, we can do our part, but at the end of the day, like life is gonna throw whatever it needs to at you so that you can heal.
In every moment, there's like a new thing. It's like, oh, I thought I was over that. JK, boo, JK. You were not. Go and cry again. Like, let that shit out. Just let
Exactly.
it out. Uh, but it's like, I feel like so opposite of what people think like a spiritual journey is. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm peaceful, like
Mhm.
I meditate. I'm cool and collected. Nothing can phase me. Keep your bad energy over
Bullshit.
there. When it's like, no, like if you have to keep the bad energy over there, that means you still got problems within you.
Yep.
But people don't want to hear that. They really don't.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, I'm enlightened now. It's like, are you though? Are you really? That's a label. Why are we going back into the anyways? Anyways.
No, but it's true. People are awakened um in very compartmentalized ways, you know? So, and then everyone's journey is so different. So, even having a little bit of compassion for, where they're at, I think is keeping our egos in check, because it's like
Mhm.
we're tempted to be like, oh, you think you're like aware and awake and like, you know, but it's like that's another ego trap, So,
Traps upon traps. It's a trap house in this mind, I swear. It's
yeah,
constantly like the ego is trying to like assert some sort of control, and you have to be
yeah,
like, I see you, boo. I
yeah.
see you. Don't think you're about to get me trapped again. And then it's like, oh, but that was another trap. Oh,
Yep.
humbled
Traps on
once
traps.
again. Humbled, humbled, humbled.
Exactly.
Ah. But I'm curious, like you mentioned, like your perspective has sort of shifted from like where it once were to now. And I guess could you share some of like the insights that you've sort of gained in your journey thus far? Because I agree, like our life is a continuous healing journey, but has there been like any key insights that really have sort of just I guess like rocked your world almost and like really brought you back into the moment?
Yeah, so back then, I would say like over 10 years ago, I was very much subscribed to this idea that like you need to have a guru, and you need to learn from them and follow their path, and like, um, yeah, and they are kind of put on a pedestal. And over the years, I've strayed away from that, and now I feel like I'm at a point where I resonate more with the idea that you are your own guru, and that no one path that someone lays out for you is the right path. Um, so much of it is like tuning into your own soul and you know learning the lessons that you need to learn to expand and grow, and following someone else's like guidelines is not always going to go as planned or work out for you. So I really believe in like being your own guru. Yeah, and you can learn a lot from other people and other people in positions where they've gone through a lot more, or like they've really worked on themselves to get to where they are. You can absolutely learn from them, but that doesn't mean that you have to put them on a pedestal and make them your guru per se. So I think that's been the biggest transformative um, thing in my journey, in my spirituality.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a big one because, like, I think a lot of times we like to have a leader. There's like
Yeah.
that leader complex of like,
Yeah.
teach me. Like, I don't know, I'm helpless. Give me the answers. Just give them to
Yeah.
me. And then there's like kind of a like an attachment that forms between you and a guru then of like I'm looking at you as like this perfect Claire, sane individual that like has it all figured out. And like if you mess up, then like that shatters my whole like
Oh
world
yeah,
of like, oh
yeah,
my God, my guru is not perfect. Oh my God. Like what am I doing? I'm following this person and they're out there eating ice cream.
yeah.
Like literally, like that was like one of the stories in the Four Noble Truth of like when the Buddha came back from being enlightened, he had like stopped sort of being this. Because you remember there was that point where the Buddha kind of went off and decided to be kind of like homeless as a
Yes,
pursuit of his
yes.
enlightenment. And in his homeless journey, he actually like made himself worse because like he was not eating well, he was not taking care of his health. And so he realized that that was not going to get him to enlightenment, like causing himself all of this unnecessary suffering. And all of his followers were like pretty much doing that same thing of like, you know, letting go of everything, not like having any material possessions. And then when the Buddha like went back to like eating more nutritious food, it was like milk rice, which they assumed like was like equivalent to ice cream back in the
Uh-huh.
day. They were like, "Oh, look at him. He's not he's not serious anymore. He's eating the good stuff." You know, like he's lost his way. And then he came back and was like, "Hey guys, I'm enlightened now." And they were like, no way, no, that's not right. And then he explained to them the Four Noble Truths, and like only one of them was like, oh shit. And the rest were kind of like, that's nice. But it's like, again, when we put our guru on a pedestal, then we don't even see like the humanity in them. And like they too are sort
Exactly.
of going through an unfolding process. And it's like not just that they know everything and like we expect them to give us the answer, which I feel like I don't know if it's because like how we're when we go through school, like you have a teacher and there's a student, and there's that sort of power dynamic of like you have the knowledge and you have to disseminate that to me. And even in religion it's kind of the same way of like you have your leader, they have books, and you read what they tell you, and that is like the word. But when you flip it and you become your own guru, it's a very different thing of like your path is your path. Like each of us has our own karmic baggage. There's a reason why
Exactly.
like no two of us are really the same. Even
Exactly.
twins, like they have their own karmic baggage and they're gonna have different lives.
Right.
Um but we I don't know, it's like this obsession with like perfection almost of like everything has to be perfect, including my guru, and this journey has to be perfect. And by the time I'm like 30, I need to be an art heart because that's what bad bitches do. And if I'm not, then like I'm a failure and my guru is a failure because they didn't get me there in my 10-week retreat and I paid them a lot of money to get me there.
Yeah, I think perfection is a part of it, and so is outsourcing your power. Like I think we're conditioned to outsource our power, and it's just so much more empowering to to learn that like I get to control, how I'm going to feel, and I get to control what information I want to take in and leave out. So yeah, it's about stepping into that place of empowerment again.
But it can be
Yeah.
so scary, I feel like, for people to really embrace their power because it's like, oh shit, like now it's all on me.
Yeah,
I can't run
that's true.
away. Like I can't point and say, well, it's their fault because it's like all on you. But it's like, boo, it was always on you.
Right.
Like you just tricked yourself again. The
Yeah,
struggle is real. It
it is.
really it's a tough one, but honestly, like I feel like I could imagine my life not being this spiritual journey. It's like I don't know, like there's for me like nothing that's as interesting as coming home to yourself and like really like going through the unraveling and like just like having all of that love and compassion for all the parts of you that just need that.
Yeah.
But how did you go about being really conscious in like how you live now and like really being intentional with the foods that you eat? Like were you always vegan from like from early childhood, or did you sort of transition from vegetarian to vegan? Or are you even vegan? Like, I might just be assuming too, like, I don't know.
No, I love your questions. I would say for many years I identified as vegan, and now I identify as plant based. I'll get into why, but I wasn't always plant based. No, I was mostly vegetarian, I think up until the age of like 23, I want to say. Yes, around then. Um, that's when I officially um, trans transitioned to a plant based diet. But basically, I remember from a very young age, I think I was like 8 years old, and I remember saying to my parents, like, I want to be vegetarian. And before that, it's not like I was eating crazy amounts of meat, obviously. I was mostly consuming like white meats, fish and chicken. My mom has always been vegetarian her entire life. So I think that definitely influenced it, but also was kind of like this gut feeling that, I knew this was right for me personally. So from that age, I was vegetarian, and then in between, I think I went through like a phase of wanting to like experiment a little bit more. I think that lasted a couple months, and then I was back to vegetarian. So at the age of 23, at that point, I had already been following a bunch of channels online, on YouTube and Facebook at the time, and just getting into Instagram and all these, health gurus and people who were not just plant based, but really into health foods. And so at that point, I think it had been like 3 years that I was toying around with the idea of turning from vegetarian to plant based, and then at one point I was just so ready for it. And I think also because I didn't go cold turkey, and I really let myself, cave into the cravings that I had, and it was such an organic process, honestly. When I turned plant based, it was like, this is really because I want to do it and I'm fully in, and not like there's this part of me that doesn't want it but is like forcing myself to, um, yeah, consume only
Be
plant
on that
based. Yeah.
hype train of like, I'm vegan, I care about the earth. But it's like, no, like your body was like, it's
It's
time.
time,
It's time.
exactly. Yeah, and I really feel up to present date that like for my body, it I thrive on this diet. I thrive on a plant based diet. I can't speak for everyone. I can't say that, I will never deny that someone else's, you know, bodily needs will be very different than mine. So I will never say, like, yeah, you're wrong for consuming this or that, and you need to consume this. I think it's so personal, and so many factors have to be considered, so many factors.
Feel it.
Yeah.
I can't believe you gave up paneer. I'm like, bro, that might be the hill I die on right there. Paneer is just too freaking good. Ugh.
That was actually one of the last few foods that I gave up. Like cheese in general, I think cheese was like the hardest for me, and I loved my paneer as well. So I totally feel you.
Just like, it's so good. So good. I guess like how do you look at the difference between then vegan and plant-based? Like, what is that sort of differentiator for you between the two?
So a vegan would be like it's really a lifestyle, and you're all about it. So that would mean no animal products at all, down to what you wear, um, and every single thing that you buy. And while I also still pretty much apply that, I don't really buy animal products for the most part. I think for me, the biggest thing is an identity thing, because
Mm.
with vegans, I don't know, there's unfortunately, I don't wish this were true, but there's a negative connotation with, the word vegan. And I really can't say that I fully resonate either with that, because a lot of vegans, they mean so well, but it's like their mission is everyone needs to be vegan, and that's that. If you're not vegan, like you're doing something wrong, and it's an abomination, Whereas I have started to stray away from that a little bit, because I am coming to realize that, it's not per se ideal for everybody and everyone's bodies to consume a plant-based diet, you know, and to be vegan. So yeah, I think once I strayed away from that, you know, belief system, I started to realize like, wow, there's so many factors that go into it. You know, the biggest one being like, what did your ancestors eat? You know, what did your parents and their parents and their parents and their parents eat? You know, and it's so much of it is about just tuning into your body, and one thing might be good for you while another thing might not be. One thing might be good for you on one day but not good on another day. You know, learning where did this product come from, like what is the source, you know, and who handled it on the way until it got to your hands, you know. So there's just so much to consider, and you know, not all meats are created equally either. So, you know, I'm not gonna throw it all out the window and say everything is bad. I think, yeah, it's very different. One might be good, another
Yeah,
might not be. Mm-hmm.
I feel it. I definitely loved your perspective on this because I felt like there was a time where I went on that jump, you know, that bandwagon of like, I'm not going to eat meat anymore because like I was really, you know, trying to like, I love animals, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I love the planet. And I was like, okay, like I don't want to be inflicting unnecessary harm in the world. So I was like, okay, we're just going to give up meat. Mind you, I ate my whole life like eating meat, like my mom's mom, like they're all meat eaters, you know. Whereas my dad's family was very much similar in the fact that like he grew up vegetarian, like my grandmother and like that whole household is 100% vegetarian. My dad was a sort of a rebel and kind of jumped ship and was like, I'm gonna taste the meat life, you know. And he's been committing carnage ever since. Um but for me, I was like, you know, I really wanted to come back to just like being like, I don't know, like kind, you know, and not having to take on unnecessary karma of like having to kill other animals. And I realized I don't think I did it the right way, but I also think like when you're talking about like every body is different, I don't think I was listening to the needs of my body at all.
Right.
And in fact, like this was like kind of a bad phase for me because then I started cutting out all of these things that my body like so desperately
Wow.
needed, like iron and like all of these things. And like I was just pushing through, like, yeah, I'm good, everything's fine, everything's great. But like I was like slowly depleting my energy, and I was just like getting to a point where like I was just like very lethargic. I just didn't have energy to do much. Like I was just never in like great moods, you know, like my appetite wasn't really there as much anymore. And I would have to rely on other things to sort of stimulate my appetite so I could go
Wow.
and eat, because otherwise like I was just like kind of moving through the day not really caring. But I was being kind to the planet and everything was great, you know. Um and so then I like got like my blood work done because I was like, hey, like, you know, something is just not right, you know, like I'm trying to like not eat meat and stuff. And my doctor was like, whoa, like first of all, for you, boo, we're gonna have to crush that dream right now,
Wow.
because they were like, for you, like they're like, you're literally anemic right now, like because you haven't been eating meat for like a couple years, and like your body like really needs that, like especially I think because as women, like we menstruate and all of that, like we have a greater need for like iron. And I was not eating like all like tofu and all of that. Not a fan, so I was just like, nah, I was a picky vegan, let's put it that way. It was not helpful. And it made me realize of like damn, like I was really just not taking care of myself and not prioritizing what my body needed, even though that wasn't what other people was saying was like good or whatever. And I recognized like in my healing of like actually working and taking all the supplements that I needed to just get back to where I was before, like I'm like, damn, like I just can't even believe I felt like that and thought that that was like okay and like thriving. And I'm like, the person that like how I feel now, and that like now my blood work and everything is like back in the normal range that it's supposed to. I'm like, damn, like I was really just grinding, like forcefully pushing myself
Right.
when like I was not necessarily having all of the tools to give my body what it needed to cultivate the energy to go out and do all of the things that I wanted to do. But I wonder like how much of our society really is pushing this narrative, even on women, of like, oh, you have to be vegan, and like if you eat meat, you're a terrible person. And it's like, no, like some of us actually really need to eat meat. And like even my acupuncturist, she'd be like, babe, you need consume that
Oh,
beef, yo,
wow.
consume it. And I'm just like, but I'm a Hindu though. I'm like, cows are sacred. And she's like, yeah, but like for you, like you really need to eat meat. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, oh. But it's like, again, like having to have love for yourself that you do these things, knowing that, like, okay, this is a price that I'm gonna pay. But if I'm going to go in this purpose and have to consume meat, make sure that I do it with intention and I'm not just out here wastefully consuming meat
Exactly.
and throwing it away and not really caring about the life that had to be taken for me to even have that piece of meat. And it's weird because it's like completely changed my view on even like hunting culture, like people that go out and forage for their meat sustainably versus like the commercial meat industry where it's just like kill, 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 eat, throw it away, we don't care. And just like really thinking about the identities that we form around our eating habits and sort of like the tribes that we then say that we want to be a part of. And it's like at the end of the day, are you being intentional, like, or is this really in line with what you need, or are
Exactly.
you just like listening to the stories again of like what other people are saying and letting that sort of cloud your vision? So I really, really appreciate your perspective of like everybody's needs are different because we're all different people, our bodies are all different, we each have our own sort of like, yeah, karmic magic that we have to
Correct.
deal with, and we shouldn't be shaming each other for
Exactly.
things without really having understanding of what that means and like
Exactly.
why.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to sourcing, like on the island, how do you go about finding even like organic foods locally? Like, are you going to like the Rastafarian farm or like any of the other local farmers, or are there like, are you able to find like locally sourced produce or even like organic things that are in the grocery stores on the island?
Yeah, honestly, it's a struggle here. Yeah, I swear to God, the other day I pulled out my notes because I wanted to start writing down all the grocery stores that I have to visit to find any particular item. Like I made a list with like, for example, Cam's or like Carrefour or Monoprix or Super U and everything that I would get in these stores, because I really have to run around the entire island to get the best item at the best price and quality. It's ridiculous, but I think I've kind of just accepted that this comes with this lifestyle and being on this island. So yeah, honestly, St. Martin is amazing because almost everything is available. This island has a lot. It all depends on how much are you willing to pay and how far are you willing to go. Far, quote unquote far, because how far is
37 square mile
really?
round trip,
Yeah, but
but
with traffic.
relative FX traffic
Yeah,
too. We
exactly.
cannot forget the traffic.
Exactly. So yeah, everything is available. Honestly, I can't complain. I do find a lot of things here that I need. A lot of the dry goods, for example, organic is possible, um, and depending on where you go, reasonably priced. And in terms of like the fresh produce, that can get a little bit more difficult. Um, I recently started getting some produce from this farm called Arrowroot Farm. They're amazing. It's these two guys, and they're really working hard to bring a lot more locally grown produce to the island. And besides that, every now and then they have like this farmers market. I think once in 2 weeks. It's held at Port de Plaisance PDP, and I try to make it out to those as well. And then you see there are people who are doing this. And besides that, there are a few grocery stores like I mean I can list them, like Monoprix has a few things. Super U, I find the quality of their produce a lot better. Um, and where else? Carrefour, Sunny Foods, Fairway, Market Garden, Kubakwai Market, Cam's, Costco. I really have to be going all around the island. No joke.
You be on a scavenger hunt
Oh my
for
God,
the
literally.
best of the best. That's awesome though. I mean,
Yeah,
it gives you really a sense of appreciation for stuff. But do you
yeah.
grow anything yourself as well? Like are you cultivating at home, or do you
Honestly,
mostly rely on like the farms?
ideal version of Raul is growing so many things and has a garden full of stuff and basically is not dependent on the grocery stores at all. But current version of me has given gardening a shot, and I don't know why. It hasn't been working out for me. I mean, I haven't committed to it as much as I would like to, so I haven't given up on it, and I'm not going to say it's not for me, but um, yeah, I've tried so many times. I can't tell you how many times I have a seed bank at home. I have so many seeds. I go out and I just buy all these seeds, and I have had, times where I've just decided, okay, I'm gonna commit an hour and I'm gonna plant all these seeds, label them, do all the work, and then I think after like a week or two, I start to see them sprout and grow, and then like motivated, and then a month later, I'm like, okay, well, the leaves are wilting, and there's pests on this one, and like that's when I kind of get demotivated, and I'm like, wow, this is really a commitment and an investment of time and energy, and I just haven't given it as much as I would like to. But one day.
I'm telling you, the pests are my biggest. Like, I didn't even realize how big of a problem pests were. They'll like, yeah, like literally last summer, I started a little garden on my
Yeah.
patio. It was like, we're gonna cultivate. We're not gonna wait. Okay, we have space. We can do this. We can do it now. And then I realized, I'm like, wait a minute. What is this? I'm like, wait, who are y'all? I'm like, first of all, how did you even find my plants? I'm like, where did you
Right.
come from? I'm like, I'm not even on the bottom floor. How did you get up here to attack my plants? I'm like,
Crazy.
what?
Oh my God.
I'm like, is this what farmers go through? And then I realized, yes, but you as a consumer, you don't see this stuff.
And let's
Oh.
not even get started with the iguanas on this island. I swear to God, if you do not have a dog, you're screwed. So that's been
I
another,
didn't even think
yeah,
of
that's been
that.
another
I figured
demotivating
you'd have a
factor.
monkey theft
Well,
problem,
that
because
too.
that used to be my grandma's biggest pet peeve. She'd be like, these blasted monkeys keep stealing my fruit.
That too. That too. Yep.
Oh, the iguanas. I didn't even think about
Oh my
them.
God, they're horrible. Because they don't have a natural predator here, so.
That's a
Mm.
fact. They just out here
Mm-hmm.
procreating like the monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Lord. What are we to do? Nature, nature,
Nature. But there are
nature.
solutions. I really believe there are solutions. I mean, ideally, we'd have like a little greenhouse in the backyard. Like, that's a goal. That's definitely a goal. Yeah.
I feel it. So, how do you go about like the culinary art of like making all of the incredible creations that you make, because they look so delicious? And I feel like oftentimes plant-based food gets such a bad rap of like, you made cheese from almonds or cashews, like that can't taste as good. Or like, why are you faux? I don't know, there's a lot of judgment, I feel like, for meat eaters and anything plant-based. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how do you make it in such a way where it's like delicious? It's like incredible and nourishing. It's like everything just beautiful
Yeah.
in one.
I mean, again, I've been exposed to a lot of different people in this game, in the plant-based food world, for so many years. I have worked in a fully plant-based kitchen for several years, side by side with several chefs. I have taken courses on it, and a lot of it is just trial and error also, like at home, following different recipes through bloggers and whatnot. And yeah, you kind of just learn, you come to understand plant-based flavors a lot better, and how to season things properly, and what foods go together. And also, so much of it is like intuition and feel, and like, yeah, bringing all of that together. I would say that would be how I go about creating what I create.
It's a legit
Yeah.
alchemy, food
Alchemy,
science.
yes. Yes, yes, yes.
I guess like was there one creation that really surprised you as you were going through sort of that experimentation process of figuring out what works and what doesn't, that you were kind of just like, "Oh my gosh, like this is incredible."
Well, I mean, for me, the biggest thing was like that I missed after I turned uh, plant based was I missed that umami from cheese. You know, it wasn't even the cheese itself that I was missing. It's just that flavor profile. So I think learning to recreate that with the different food items that we have, and being able to mimic it so well to the point where like it would satisfy my craving, I think that would be like one of the biggest ones. And for a lot of people, like um, the umami flavor profile, the cheesy, yeah, sort of depth of flavor.
Yeah. And I'm assuming this is not like through nutritional yeast, which is like I feel like what a lot of people use to get sort of that,
Well, nutritional yeast
that
is a
flavor.
part of it for sure. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it's a part of it. And then like just some foods work very well too, in the end, like that you can, I guess, alchemize to get that flavor profile, like, and cashews happen to be one of those ingredients. So it's the perfect fat that's kind of neutral in taste. It has its own flavor profile, but it's definitely more neutral than a lot of other nuts. And there's so much that you can do with it. I would say cashews are one of my favorite ingredients, and if you know what to do with cashews, you can make a lot. And so yeah, the combination of like nutritional yeast and cashews, and then when you get into fermentation, that opens up the door for so much more flavor. And so I've been experimenting with a lot more fermented foods, and yeah, I would say that has definitely played a huge role in getting the flavor profiles that I'm looking for.
Yeah. Because I was gonna ask you about like the
Yeah.
kombuchas you be making too, because I'm like the whole like I feel like mushrooms and
Yeah.
fungi and all that mycelium is like its own category of like food creation, preservation, like really making the most out of the foods that you have. And kombucha is so good, but I'm like every time I see how they make them, like I'm so scared I might be killing myself right here. Like, and I'm curious, like how you sort of went into that process of like, because fermentation is literally its own
Oh yeah.
science, and you have to really understand like temperature and like sugars and like all of these different
Yeah.
things to really ensure that it's a suitable, hospitable
Yeah.
environment, clean environment,
Yeah.
so you get something beautiful in the
Yeah.
end.
Um, yeah, again, it, it was just a lot of experimentation, but I also did take a course actually, now that you mention. I had taken a plant-based cheese and fermentation course in Barcelona around 2018. Yeah, it was a 1 week long program, and they really dove deep into so many different, fermented foods, and kombucha was one of them. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how that kick-started my journey into more fermented foods. Yeah.
Cool. I could totally see St. Martin now having its own like bush tea kombucha brand or
Ooh, I have not
coconut water
experimented with that
kombucha,
one. That's a nice flavor.
hibiscus, like a hibiscus
Yes.
kombucha,
Sorrel kombucha.
like
Yes. Yes.
ooh, ooh, that's a good one. Oh, that hit a nerve. Oh, that sounds fire. Oh, have you made that? You've made a
Yeah, I
sorrel
have.
kombucha?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
I need a bottle. I am in
Well, next
desperate
time
need
you're
of a
here.
bottle of that. Okay, I'll make note. I'll make note. But I'm curious too. So then, stepping out of like food, how has sort of like your yoga practice also, I guess, sort of helped in this whole like conscious living, lifestyle that you adopt? Because I agree. Like I feel like in any spiritual practice, it really is a practice that we go through every day, and that's why I love yoga for that reason. Of like it really grounds you in the present and like forces you to embrace stress at
Oh,
the same
yes.
time. Um, but yeah, like how has that sort of helped you in your conscious living path?
Hmm. Well, I mean, honestly, any form of movement, I feel like, you know, will definitely help with, moving energy through your body, stuck energy. Um, and specifically, yoga, I feel, does such a good job at that. And we're saying yoga, but like specifically the physical practice of yoga, because there's so much more to yoga than just the asana, the movement. Um, yeah, I would say that I had gravitated towards yoga from a very young age, so it's always something that I was into. But it wasn't until I think when I was, yeah, I was living in the Netherlands, but I think this was like 2015 at the time that I really got into it and, made it like a foundational practice in my life. And then, I went through phases where I would practice and then, stop practicing and then practice and then start practicing again. And then I took a teacher training as well. And that was mainly just to dive deeper into my own practice and my own journey with yoga. And yeah, at that point, I had learned so much more about yoga than just what I thought I knew. And from there on, it's been like something that definitely has grounded me a lot, and just also seeing how my progress and my practice has changed over the years, and reflecting on it has definitely been very beautiful to witness. But yoga is definitely here to stay. Like it's in for the long haul in my journey.
I feel that. I can't imagine life without it. I'm
Yeah.
just like, who was I? Who am I without
Yeah.
yoga? I don't know that person. Like, I don't know her. Like, I'm just like, it's just so good on
Yeah.
so many levels that I'm like, if I know somebody that loves yoga, I'm like, we can be friends. We can totally be friends. I don't need to know anything else about you, but if you love yoga, like, I'm like, we can totally, we're on the same wavelength
Right.
already, you know. I guess, like, have you tried different practices of yoga, or is it like hot yoga as well as like cooler yogas, or
So, I've practiced many different styles of yoga, not consistently, but many. I think the biggest ones would be like vinyasa and yin. Those are like the top two for me. And also, my teacher training was in vinyasa and yin, and that's actually why I chose that teacher training, because it had both. So yeah, yin would be like the cooler, you know, more passive, um, going into deeper um, parts of the body, past the muscle, like the different ligaments and tissues. And then, of course, the vinyasa, which is definitely way more active and power based, more warming. So yeah, I would say these are the top two styles for me, but I've definitely tried many other. I've tried hatha, I've tried ashtanga, Iyengar a little bit here and there, and hot yoga, and yeah. I mean, there's so many more, right?
hmm. Yeah, because you do some of the acro yoga with
Right, and then there's
Nelly.
acro yoga. That's a whole other world of yoga. So I do that
Yeah.
once in a while. I definitely try to join Nelly whenever I can. I love acro yoga. I'm a huge fan of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know, like I love practices that bring people
Yes.
together. I feel like especially in the age of like technology, people we're like so much more isolated in like when I feel like in these larger countries compared to like on the island, everybody's in everybody's business. Um but like yeah, I love practices that really like bring about a community because like I don't know, there's something beautiful about when people are together and they're sharing in each other's energy. I feel like we need that, like we're social creatures for that
Yes.
reason. And yeah, it's beautiful to see like people heal, you
Definitely.
know, through these practices and like gain, like you're saying, step into their power and own their
Yes.
power and be witness to their own power and like pushing themselves past their own like limiting beliefs of like, oh, I can't do that pose, but then bam, with a little support, you right there. It wasn't too bad, you know. It's beautiful to witness.
Yeah, absolutely. And acro yoga is definitely a very intimate practice, because I really feel like it requires you to trust the person that you're working with.
That is so true. You're not trying to fall
Yeah.
on your head or like being these like random like you're flying and then it's like, oh, legs were not positioned correctly. We're gonna have to do that
Yep.
again. But I feel like it's also cool because it shows you like like you would think like people that are bigger and like people that are smaller can't do like acro together, but it's like crazy when you see like how the bodies are able to
Oh
sort of
yeah.
balance themselves and like all of this sort of like unity that you have with like two bodies working
Yes.
together. Like I don't know, I find it so like I like how you said intimate, but it's like also so like just like powerful and just like understanding how to play with the
Right.
self, you
Yes.
know. Just fun stuff. But I'm curious, like, I guess for people that might be trying to be more, you know, conscious in the way that they live, more present, less in their mind, more maybe in their heart space, really more in tune with their body. Do you have any sort of like tips for them on like, you know, things that they can maybe consider or just advice that you wish maybe you had just help facilitate like their journey?
Mm. Yeah. Um. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, but I think I'm a huge fan of movement. I'm a huge fan of it, and it wasn't until like since I moved back to the island end of 2020 that movement became such a huge part of my life. So I'm not going to say that it was always like this. And I really feel like movement helps, again, like I said earlier, it helps to get energy that has been stuck for longer periods of time to really get flowing and moving. And I think if people want to tap more into their feelings, they have to do it through the body. So that's going to require movement. Um, and not all movement is created equally, but like for example, like the practice of yin yoga, where you're moving, but you're still very much forced to tap into your feelings and be present with them because you have to stay in a posture for a very long time. Um, that could definitely be something that could help. Another tip that I would say is like literally just turn off your phone, set a timer for like 10 to 15 minutes where you're with yourself and your thoughts and your feelings and just start to write. Write down what you're feeling and ask yourself questions, like do a little check-in, like what am I feeling today? What am I feeling in this moment? Is there something that's stuck? Is there something that needs to come out? Is there something I have to express? Um, I would say that would really help also to tap into um, feelings in the heart center as well. Yeah, those are, I guess, two that come to mind right now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your energy with us today. Like, I really appreciate just getting your perspective on these things and, like, hopefully inspiring folks to maybe think differently about how they go about their life or how they form their identities about things. And hopefully just getting people more awakened to being present with themselves and to love themselves for who they are in the moment,
Yes, yes,
accepting it
yes.
all.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.